It's the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Please stand for a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the posting of our national colors. Please be seated. Thank you all for taking the time to attend this event. It's a pretty special thing, I think, for all of us, and I think it's important that we take the time to remember ourselves, to remember all of our fellow veterans, and just as much to remember those currently serving. And I'd like to say just thank you to the men of Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 162 Infantry, who are your color guard today. I'd like to make an introduction here. Those of you that don't know, Dr. Jane Reeder is here tonight or today, and she's, as far as I'm seeing, one of the few non-veterans that's here, but she has a very special perspective that I think often gets forgotten about when we talk about Veterans Day, and it's the perspective of the mother, of the wife, of the children that are there when the veteran is gone, or when the soldier, the sailor, the airman, the Marine, the Coast Guardsman, when they're gone. We oftentimes forget about those that are left behind and the amount of sacrifice that they make. So this time I'd like to bring Dr. Reeder up to speak some words for us.
Thank you. I don't think I need this. I think everybody who knows me knows that I'm more than loud enough without this. So good morning and welcome, everybody. Welcome to Lena and to this special day. So I want to tell you a story. So in 1914, William Arthur and Frederick Breeze walked into the train station in Stoke-on-Trent in England and boarded a train that ultimately took them to France. Martha, their mother, Frances Elizabeth, their sister, and Anne Francis, their niece, spent the war rolling bandages to send to the front and welcomed the wounded back and waited for news. In 1925, Anne Francis, who had rolled those same bandages, married Tom, a man who was too young for the First War and too old for the Second. In 1932, Tom and Anne Francis built the obligatory bomb shelter in the garden. Unfortunately, Tom, while a man of many, many, many talents, failed to have the one talent needed to ensure that it did not fall down, and instead transferred his attention to spending the war as an air raid warden, sounding the alarms and filling the public shelters with those escaping the raids on the nearby steelworks. His two daughters were scheduled to evacuate, and on the eve of their leaving on the 12th of September 1940, Tom decided not to send his daughters on the SS Benares. On September the 17th, 1940, Benares was sunk by a torpedo, losing all on board. His elder daughter, Sheila, then spent the war on fire watch at her high school. The younger daughter played in the hole of the failed garden shelter, and his wife fed the servicemen, billeted with them, and learned how to stretch those ration books to almost breaking point. Meanwhile, a young man from Wales, Idwell Watkins, was training to fly a plane designed by a certain R.J. Mitchell, also a local man from Stoke-on-Trent in the UK. RJ never saw his plane fly, but Idwal did, flying one of the 20,000 Spitfires produced during the war. His future wife, meanwhile, watched the Spitfires protect the steelworks as she played in, once again, that failed bomb shelter. Across the Atlantic, Lyle joined the Army Air Corps in 1944, leaving his wife and young son in Ashland, Oregon, and moved to multiple bases ready to go to Europe when his number was called. His brother-in-law survived the Philippines, but did not survive coming home. Not to be outdone, however, Lyle's grandson, Robert, graduated Oregon State, and on the hottest day of the century, swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. His mother, while not exactly ecstatic at the idea of this, was told very firmly by her daughter, "Suck it up, buttercup," and it's only for 6 months. We waited. We waited for calls on Sunday. We waited for letters giving us updates. And of course, the inevitable, "Hey, Mom, can you order boots, tennis shoes, books, socks, pens, stamps," or whatever was needed. A year has passed. He's now at JBLM and speaking in acronyms we barely understand, and for which Al is the main translator for me. Some days Robert's a saw gunner, which I understand is, quote, "a big-ass gun handler, Mom," or a radio operator, or more recently, folding his 6-foot frame into a 3-foot area behind the wheel of a striker as he prepares for the unthinkable. As we approach the 11th hour of the 11th day in the 11th month, we are asked to remember those who served in the many wars and conflicts. In the rat-infested mud trenches of World War I, the skies and lands of Europe, the jungles of the Pacific Rim, the sandbox, in many places against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As I'm in your presence today, I'm reminded of William, Arthur, Fred, Idwal, Lyle, and the many millions who have served and prepared to give all. I'm also honored to be part of a family of wives, husbands, sisters, grandparents, aunts, who rolled bandages, ushered people to safety, threw sand on burning debris that landed on the school roof, wrote letters, and most of all, waited for you all to come home. Thank you for your service and for allowing me to share this day of remembrance with you.
So, it's Veterans Day. It's the 11th day of the 11th month. So, a little bit about the history of Veterans Day. Veterans Day started immediately after World War I because at the 11th hour, on the 11th day, on the 11th month, the guns fell silent on the Western Front. That's when the armistice happened, and we used to call it Armistice Day. Here in America, we were kind of ahead of most of the other countries that started having Remembrance Day on 11/11/11 because we already had Memorial Day. We'd had it ever since the end of the Civil War. And in 1866, we made our own Memorial Day. But because there were so many soldiers, and indeed so many soldiers that were broken and smashed, and legless, and everything else, we said we need to recognize all of our veterans for this incredible, hellacious war that they just finished. And the tradition continues. It's important on a day like today that we remember this is one of the few times when we celebrate those things, how we're all the same, okay? There's lots of days we celebrate diversity. There's lots of days that we talk about all kinds of different things. But on this day, we celebrate how all of us are the same. We celebrate on this day all of the veterans before, long gone, recently retired, and still serving. We recognize how we're all the same, okay? Here in Lane County, we have 30,000 veterans in Lane County. We have 1,000 currently serving military personnel. 10% of Lane County is a veteran. We've got one of the highest percentages of any county. We're in the top 10% in the entire country. And to put it into perspective, we have a half again higher percentage of veterans in Lane County than San Diego County, okay, which is huge, okay? There's 30,000 veterans and there's about 300,000 people in this county. So that should put a lot of things into perspective and just how many people to your left and right are a veteran or a fellow veteran or what have you. Additionally, there are 1,000 currently serving military personnel. There's 800 reserve component personnel, primarily Army. There's another 200 to 250 active duty military personnel that are currently serving from 4 of the 5 branches of service: Army, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard here in Lane County. We have veterans in this county from every single conflict from World War II all the way to present. I had hoped to have a guest speaker here, but it fell through. That was a D-Day veteran that actually jumped in to all 3 jumps in World War II. He jumped in it in Normandy at D-Day. He liberated Saint-Mary-Glisse. He jumped in at Anzio, and he jumped in at Market Garden. And here's this guy that's this incredible hero that's walking amongst us. This guy's a treasure trove of American history. And last June, he just had the opportunity to go back to France for the first time in almost 80 years and see where he jumped in and see Saint-Mary-Glisse that he helped to liberate, and was actually able to talk to a lady who was 95 years old, only 2 years younger than him, who lived in Saint-Mary-Glisse her entire life and remembered when the soldiers came in to liberate Saint-Mary-Glisse. The 4-day tour was on its first day, and it stopped about halfway through the day so that he could spend the second half of the day with this French lady and this American soldier. Touching stuff. So, like I said, today's a day we celebrate how we're all the same. And the big way that we're all the same is we all wrote a blank check. Every one of us, when we enlisted, we wrote a blank check, payable to, up to and including our lives in the service of this great country. Well, just like all of you guys, I didn't forget, and I'm sure none of you did either. And I honor you guys in the back. So, normally on Veterans Day, and Memorial Day, but also Veterans Day, it's generally tradition that we read in Flanders Fields. Usually we wear a poppy, and when I do these kinds of events, I read in Flanders Fields. Somebody said, we should give in Flanders Fields a break this time. So I went, well, okay. So I have another one. If you will, please bear with me. It's called A Veteran, and it's by a man named Reginald Gibbons. My father came down not killed. Fail from among others, killers or killed, for whom he'd worn a uniform, and he lived a long, long afterward. A steady man on the flattest of plains, I called after him many times, surprised when I heard the catch in my own voice. He didn't know how to find the solace of listening to someone else speak of what he'd seen and survived. He himself closed his own mouth against his own words. In the wrong sequence, his spirit, then his mind, and last his body, crossed over that infamous peat, inky, metaphorical water that has no far shore. I think he was carried like a leaf in currents so gentle that a duckling, had it been alive, could have braved them. but too strong for a leaf and saturated with minerals that steadily replaced organic cells in water that turned my father, a former soldier, to leaf delicate stone inscribed with the axiom of countless veins. I thought that was pretty moving stuff. Because ultimately we're here to celebrate all veterans, every one of us, okay? That unifying thing for all of us. And because we're celebrating all veterans, it's not just those of us that are walking on the green side right now. It's not just those of us that are here to celebrate these things. It's also the fallen veterans, okay? The fallen are also, they're veterans too. And while we're not just focusing just on the fallen, we're going to remember them. We're certainly going to remember the veterans that came before us. And one day, there'll be veterans that are going to come after us. So if you look to your right, as you entered the area today, you'll have noticed a small table in a place of honor near the head table. It's set for one. The military cast is filled with symbolism. The table is our way of symbolizing the fact that members of our honored military are missing from our midst. They're the fallen soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, our brothers and sisters. They are unable to be with us this evening, so we remember them. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. The single rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the families and the loved ones of their comrades in arms and kept the faith and waited for them to return. ID tags are blank, symbolizing that at any time a similar fate could await those of us who have taken up the profession of arms in the noble defense of our nation. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate. The salt upon the bread plate is symbolic of the family's tears as they mourn. The glass is inverted. They can't toast with us today. The chair is empty. They're not here. Remember. So, all of us have at one point either known someone that's in this room or have yourselves, or a combination of the two, sign that blank check. And there was another guy that signed a blank check. His name was Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt's one of my heroes, actually. I'm a huge fan of Teddy Roosevelt. He's probably my favorite of all the presidents in history. And you may or may not know about, a charge up San Juan Hill that Teddy Roosevelt led when he was leading a cavalry unit known as the Rough Riders. 10 years after the war, in the Spanish-American War, he ran for president, and Teddy got challenged by his opponent. His opponent said, in public, I don't think you really did all that stuff. I think that you're embellishing things. I don't think you really made a charge up San Juan Hill. And I don't think you're everything that you try to represent yourself to be. I ain't got much time for you, and I don't think the American people should either. Teddy Roosevelt was kind of known for being kind of an intense guy, and everybody kind of went, because people thought Teddy Roosevelt, who's kind of a stout dude as well, was probably going to go over there and knock the guy's block off, but he didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. What he did was he stopped, he took a minute, and he made a statement that he later memorialized. And what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out where the strong man stumbled or the doer of good deeds could have done better. It is the man who's actually in the arena, his face marred with dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms and the great devotions of high achievement, who errs and comes up short time and time again. For if he wins, then he wins while doing greatly. If he loses, well, then he loses while striving valiantly. So this place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Nobody ever heard from the other guy again after that. Nobody ever heard about the guy that came in second place after that. And I would submit to you that all of you veterans, at one time, you were the man in the arena. And you soldiers in the back, you are the men in the arena, and you're my heroes. Thank you for your attendance to our simple ceremony. Please stand for the retirement of our national colors. Thank you all for attending.